Don't you dare have a child with another man, you cheater. You no good woman.
My husband's face turned red as he spat out these insults at me.
We're getting a divorce right now. Both of you, get out of this house.
His loud and aggressive voice made me close my eyes in disgust. There had been some misunderstandings between us and his family, but I never expected him to lash out so vilely. Moreover, his accusations were unfounded. There was no way I would cheat. The reason for this situation was the result of our daughter's blood test. Both my husband and I have blood type O, so our child should also have blood type O, but surprisingly, our daughter's blood type came back as type A. As soon as he heard this, my husband's face turned pale, convinced I had cheated, and he blamed me entirely. I would never cheat, but this is puzzling, and I want to investigate. Let's do a DNA test. When I calmly suggested this, my husband looked down on me with a sneer.
Yo, go ahead. It'll just prove your infidelity anyway. Just go ahead and hang yourself.
My husband, stubborn once he's made up his mind, gleefully offered his own hair for the test. 2 weeks later, the DNA test results arrived. I showed them to my still doubtful husband. His eyes widened slowly, and his brows, previously furrowed in anger, now drooped with confusion and worry.
This can't be. What's going on?
Looking him straight in the eye, I said calmly, I don't know, but you wanted a divorce, so let's proceed with that. And we should tell your parents about this. They'll understand the truth. My name is Michelle. I'm 28 years old. I work for a company that deals in household goods in the HR department. I met my husband, Kevin, at a gathering through mutual friends. He works in a family-owned tech business with his parents. I decided to marry him because his easygoing nature was a soothing contrast to my structured corporate life. We got along well, but dealing with my in-laws was a constant source of stress. Because my in-laws think that a woman should join her husband's family after marriage, though I want to continue my job even after marrying, our views clash, leading to me receiving snide remarks every time we meet.
Are you still working? It's disgraceful for a woman to be gallivanting about. Quit your job and help out at home.
My mill often called me just to say such things. Dodging her was one thing, but it was quite stressful to spend my precious days off with her. I love my job, and recently I've been involved in hiring new talent. I look forward to building my career. Additionally, the relationships at my company are good, and although there are challenges at work, I never have unpleasant experiences. It's not just about the money. I want to continue working.
You should speak up, too.
When my mill turned her attention to my husband, he seemed evasive, but he respected my wishes.
If she wants to keep her current job, that's fine, isn't it? Dad's still healthy, and I'm not going to take over right away. Let us have our own family life the way we want it.
Hearing this, my mill narrowed her eyes in irritation and clicked her tongue.
You've become quite the back-talker, haven't you? Living together is obviously the best choice. Honestly, I wonder what your wife has been telling you.
To such a mother, my husband responded with a sigh of exasperation.
Seriously, even if she helps out, it's not like our sales are going to skyrocket overnight. Having her work would increase our income, and that would be more helpful.
While listening to this, It would be a lie to say that thoughts like, "Is it all about the money?" or "I wish for more affectionate words" didn't cross my mind. But I appreciate the fact that he was protecting the lifestyle I desire. I decided to turn a blind eye to the emotional aspect and be thankful to my husband. However, if such exchanges continue for months, half a year, and then a year, I can't stay the same. My mill, without giving up, keeps insisting on living together and retiring. It seems she really has a strong attachment to this idea and is not willing to compromise at all. Frustration must have boiled over because she exclaimed, "You're crazy for being so obsessed with going out to work. What are you after? A man?" "Yes, that must be it." "You're neglecting your husband for a man at work, aren't you? How disgusting. That's just filthy," she ranted, letting her imagination run wild and working herself into a hysterical state. Calming her down was tough, and it took effort to placate her with tea and snacks. Of course, my husband never believed her fantasies. But he seemed to grow wary of Mimel's constant nagging and tantrums, and he no longer stood up for me as he used to.
Look, if it's going to upset Mom this much, shouldn't we just give in? You must be stressed out with her raging all the time, Michelle. Eventually, I'll take over the business anyway, and it might be quicker to just quit your job and live with my parents.
Kevin murmured this while looking down at the dining table. After finishing, he held his head in his hands and sighed deeply. I can understand how he feels caught in the middle and tormented between his mother and me. However, I was shocked to lose the support of someone who used to stand by me. Why? Why would you say that too? I stopped washing dishes and appealed to him in a tearful voice.
Why, you ask? You see how my mother is. I'm tired of being constantly attacked by her just for continuing our current life. And you must be tired of it too, right? We've been dealing with the same thing for over a year now. Do you still want to keep working despite that?
Indeed, I had reached my limit with the escalating sarcasm and verbal abuse from my mill. But my job is an important part of my life. I really don't want to let it go. And considering my mill's nature, living together could just start a new phase of harassment. Yes, but you're her son, right? I want you to convince her. You said it was beneficial for us to have my income. Don't just cave into your mother. There's no guarantee that living together will solve everything. Tears were welling up in my eyes, but at the same time, I was clenching and trembling my fist. As well as feeling sad about my husband's betrayal, anger was bubbling up inside me. Then, Kevin, clearly irritated, slammed the newspaper on the table and stood up abruptly.
Enough already. That's old news. Sticking to the same opinion won't solve anything. You're stubborn and selfish.
Wait, you say what suits you and flip-flop when it doesn't. That's dishonest. I retorted strongly as he tried to leave. Our day ended with such argumentative exchanges. I was exhausted and went to bed early, leaving the chores half done. Why had things come to this? The issue with my mill was bad enough, but what was really painful was how my husband's attitude has changed. If he drifted away, I would be completely alone and unsupported. Feeling utterly alone with no one to support me, I had to stand firm in my beliefs, which was an incredibly daunting experience. Our relationship had been strained since that fight, but a few weeks later, I found out I was pregnant. After feeling unwell for days and being urged by colleagues to see a doctor, I discovered I was 2 months pregnant. Kevin was happy about the news. He then became more attentive to my health.
If it's a boy, he could be my heir. If it's a girl, I hope she's as cute as you. Michelle, you've been managing both work and household chores, but this is an important time, and you shouldn't overdo it.
Moved by his kind words, I was touched for a moment. But just when I thought everything was going well, my husband bluntly said the very thing I didn't want to hear.
Yeah, how about you resign now? Work might be too much during pregnancy, and this is a good chance. If we live with my parents, my mom will take care of everything so you can relax.
I felt my head heat up with anger at his words. Had he forgotten all our discussions and arguments? How could he say such a thing with a smile? Don't be absurd. This is not a good opportunity. It's like you're using the baby to force me into compliance. We didn't have a child for that reason, did we? I'm not quitting my job. As I ranted, Kevin looked troubled.
Calm down. Why are you so angry? It's common for women to quit after getting pregnant.
It's common, but my company has maternity and parental leave policies. I plan to take maternity leave, then return to work. If I quit now, we'll lose the income during the leave. Kevin listened to my persuasion absently at first, but he suddenly became attentive towards the end. It seemed like the financial aspect caught his interest.
Oh, so maybe quitting after the parental leave could work. Let's just take the leave for now and decide later.
He said that in a vague and non-committal tone, then he looked away from me. Looking at my husband turning on the TV with an indifferent face, I couldn't help but sigh. I hadn't realized before we married, but I never thought he could be so opportunistic and materialistic. I must be stronger going forward. A few months later, I went back to my parents' house for childbirth. I wanted to avoid any interaction with my in-laws and Mill around the time of the birth. My parents were very worried when I told them about my Millen husband, and they were even angrier at my husband than I was.
You can't trust someone whose words change so frequently. You absolutely shouldn't stay with him. If this continues, it might be worth considering a divorce.
My mother must have been really upset about my husband, for she spoke in a low voice while forcefully handling the knife she was using to cook. Even I, who had actually had a big argument with him, felt overwhelmed by her intensity. Thank you, but he's not a bad person as long as his mom and family don't interfere. Life will change once the baby is born, so I want to wait and see how things go. I said this, and my mother sighed worriedly.
You're patient, which is good, but you tend to bottle things up. If it gets too much, you must tell us immediately, okay?
Yes, I understand. I felt my mother's strong love as I said this, and months later, I gave birth to a healthy baby girl. We named our daughter Miriam. I continued to live at my parents' home, preferring it instead of being near my in-laws. And after a year, when I found a daycare, I returned home and resumed working. During my stay at my parents' home, my husband visited occasionally to see our daughter, but we never discussed living together with his parents or resigning from work again. Rather, both of us avoided the topic. My mother never showed her anger in front of me but pressed him indirectly. Now that the family is growing with the birth of the child, please support Michelle and the child properly. While emphasizing please take care of them, she exerted pressure indirectly. Upon returning to the house where I lived with my husband, I found that neither he nor my Mill had changed, and Mill would barge into our home to see her grandchild and berate me, saying, "Enough is enough. How can a woman who has given birth not live with her husband's family and still keep working? There's a limit to being stubborn." As for my husband, he would just make non-committal remarks like, "Well, parenting has its ups and downs. It will all work out eventually," brushing everything off with casual comments. And just like that, 2 years flew by. My daughter's growth was remarkable. She could then walk around freely and has even started to talk a bit. I continued working part-time while sending my child to daycare, without living with my in-laws. My husband seemed too accustomed to both his mother's tirades and my arguments, merely watching TV impassively during our disputes. I no longer had any expectations of him. I hoped that someday, with my own strength, I would be able to convince them, and I was waiting for the right moment to do so. One day, my daughter Miriam fell ill. She developed red rashes all over her body and cried uncomfortably, whether in pain or itchiness. Realizing the seriousness, I took emergency leave from work and rushed her to the hospital. They suggested a blood test just to be cautious, so I requested the necessary tests. When asked about her blood type, I said we didn't know, so they included it in the tests. I thought it was unnecessary, but the doctor recommended it as a precaution, so I reluctantly agreed. The diagnosis revealed that the rash was atopic dermatitis, and specific medication was prescribed. It was good to understand the inflammation and how to treat it, but the issue was the blood type revealed by the test. My husband and I are both type O, and logically our child should also be type O. I was reluctant about the blood type test because I thought it was unnecessary, given what we already knew. Yet, what could this result mean? Feeling an indescribable chill, I returned home. I then calmly called my husband to discuss our daughter's atopic dermatitis and showed him the blood type test results. "Isn't it strange that we're both type O, but Miriam is type A?" I asked him while looking down. He became furious, raised his voice, and said,
"This means divorce. You must have cheated at work."
Shocked by his aggressive manner, I flinched. "Wait, this is just a report. There might be a mistake in the test results."
"No way. Having a child with another man, how? My mother said your obsession with work was because of another man, and she was right. Pretending to be a career woman while messing around with men, what a player."
My husband, with his face turning bright red and spitting, hurled insults at me. Overwhelmed by the loudness and violence of his voice, I felt a deep revulsion and instinctively closed my eyes. The harshness of his words and his baseless accusations filled me with disgust and shock. "Stop talking like that. I would never cheat. You know I've been going back and forth between work and home every day. Don't you trust your own wife?"
There's no trust or crap to talk about. The test results here say it all.
Kevin yelled, aggressively slapping the paper with the test results. It seemed like we were completely failing to communicate. I had completely misjudged my partner. That was a painful realization to me.
I won't raise someone else's child. I don't even want to see the face of a child born by such a worthless woman. Get out of this house, both of you, right now. And since you cheated, expect me to sue for alimony.
His shouting filled the house, waking Miriam in the next room, who started crying. As her rash had not yet subsided, I could only imagine how uncomfortable she must be feeling at that time. While I was distressed thinking about my daughter, my husband was forcefully trying to evict us from the house, piling our belongings on us right then and there. In a panic, I grabbed my valuables and the medicine prescribed by the hospital. Then, at the doorway, I confronted my husband one last time. Please listen to me. This is too strange not to investigate. If it bothers you that much, let's do a DNA test. Hearing this, my husband looked down on me arrogantly.
Fine, do it. It'll just prove your infidelity. Go ahead and hang yourself.
He stubbornly insisted, eagerly offering his hair for the test. We were abruptly forced out of the house, after which we headed to my parents' home in a rush. It was a 2-hour journey by express train, and by the time we arrived, I was exhausted. My mother was shocked to see us and furious upon hearing the story.
This is outrageous. To unilaterally decide and kick you out. Something's wrong. The blood test is indeed strange, but as a couple, you should work together to find a cause. Send the husband back to his parents.
My mother, having said that, gently applied ointment to her daughter, who was still itching, and soothingly said, "It must have hurt, and you were scared, weren't you? Poor Miriam, you haven't done anything wrong." I apologized to my company and took leave, focusing on caring for my daughter while staying with my parents. I also sent my husband's hair for DNA testing and waited for the results. Given that I hadn't cheated, the blood type issue was genuinely puzzling. Though I hated to think of it, even if my husband had been unfaithful, any child should have been from his mistress, which should not lead to this situation. After a little over 2 weeks, the DNA test results came. Together with my mother, I slowly opened the envelope. The document contained surprising information. Of course, Miriam was undoubtedly the child of my husband and me. It also confirmed my blood type as O. However, my husband's blood type was revealed to be type A. I went back to the house I had been expelled from to share this fact. Anticipating trouble, I decided to leave my daughter with my mother.
What are you doing here, you bitch?
My husband, who was at home, greeted me coldly, but I remained calm and showed him the test results. His eyes widened slowly as he looked at the paper, his anger shifting to confusion and anxiety.
That can't be. How is this possible?
He had always believed he was type O. Of course, there was no reason to lie about such a thing, and my husband himself must have believed that he was indeed what he had always thought he was. Looking directly at my trembling husband, I spoke in an even tone. "We should discuss this with your parents. Surely the truth will come out." To my surprise, my husband nodded in agreement. He had previously mentioned both his parents were type O. There might be a lie in there. The tension and fear of uncovering a secret about his birth seemed to shrink him. He appeared entirely different from the man who had verbally abused me. Heading to his parents' house, it seemed he had already discussed our daughter's blood type and my alleged infidelity, judging by the icy stares from his mother.
Why are you with that loose woman?
She showed her disgust openly. My husband presented the DNA test results to her with trembling hands.
It's not the time for such talk. Look at this. You and Dad both said I was type O. Why does it show type A?
She slowly took the paper and stared at it intently, her face strained. Then, we were led to a back room and seated on a sofa. Facing us, she sat upright, her demeanor formal and silent. She seemed to have something to say but hesitated, biting her lip and looking down.
Why are you silent, Mom? Is there a reason? You're type O, Dad's type O, so naturally, I should be type O too, right?
My husband, trying to appear strong, was visibly shaken, his hands trembling under the table.
Well, but
My Mill's face quickly lost its vitality, turning as white as a doll's. She frowned painfully, her lips turning purple and trembling.
Come on, why won't you say it? Tell me the truth.
Despite noticing his mother's condition, my husband persisted in his questioning. Then there were a few seconds of silence. Then my Mill let out a quiet sigh and slowly started to speak.
I've kept silent until now. The truth is, Kevin, you are not the child of your father and me.
Understandably, my husband was greatly shaken by this sudden revelation.
What? No way. What do you mean?
Naturally, Kevin was greatly flustered by sudden confession.
When I was about to marry your father, I had a careless affair with another man. You are the child from that time.
My husband was then 30. It must be a tremendous shock to see the belief in one's family crumble after all these years. He was visibly shaking from head to shoulders.
Does Dad know about this?
When my husband asked, his mother made a pained expression. And just from that look, the answer became clear.
You've hidden this from me and Dad all along.
My husband, mouth agape and on the verge of tears, continued to stare at his mother. She shed a single tear.
Kevin, it's true that we raised you dearly as our own child.
She had an affair shortly after her marriage and became pregnant with that man's child, continuing her life while deceiving her family that the child was her husband's. Yet, she maintained her love for her son throughout.
Even if you say that, I can't accept it. So, was your affair partner type A? Why hide such an important thing?
My husband, eyes red from holding back tears, stood up to confront her.
Probably.
She murmured, then fell silent, looking down. What a situation. The long-hidden secret of my Mill came to light because of my daughter's blood type. Was it fate or divine retribution? At least Miriam is undoubtedly mine and my husband's child, leaving me with no further role. I was ready to watch the unfolding scene.
Can this really happen? True, I never verified my blood type through testing. I've always been healthy since childhood, so I never needed to. I had no choice but to believe Mom when she said I was type O.
I truly am sorry.
At that moment, my Mill responded meekly. Quietly, the door to the room opened.
I've heard everything.
There stood my Phil, his expression beyond anger, chillingly impassive. He also had recommended letting me into the house and would make snide remarks whenever we met, but I didn't interact with him much because my Mill's extremism was too dominant. His face, usually concerned about his business's future, now expressed a feeling of betrayal and disappointment towards my Mill's concealed infidelity.
Hey, is it true that Kevin isn't our child?
My Phil asked in a low voice.
Were you listening?
My Mill began to panic, realizing her private conversation had been overheard. While she fumbled for excuses, my Phil found the test results and scrutinized them.
You had an affair with another manual, and you've been deceiving me all these years.
My FIL's mask of forced calmness quickly fell away. His face turned bright red as he shouted at my Mill with a demonic expression.
I didn't mean to deceive you. Kevin is our beloved son. Haven't we cherished raising him?
Yes, indeed. Deceived by you. I've been raising another man's child for 30 years.
With a loud bang, my Phil slammed the test results onto the table. At his fierce demeanor, both my husband and I involuntarily flinched. Unable to withstand his fury, my Mill stood up to retort.
What now? It's useless to get angry about it. I haven't been in contact with that man anymore, and it was 30 years ago. It should be statute barred by now, right?
No statute of limitations. I never thought you could be such an unfaithful woman. The evidence of your affair is still standing right here.
My Phil shouted this while pointing at my husband. Caught in the shocking quarrel between his parents, my husband was speechless.
Given this revelation, I will end our marriage. We're getting a divorce. And you, Kevin, if you're not my son, don't ever cross our threshold again.
Wait, this can't be real.
Amid the ongoing quarrel between my in-laws, my husband was thrown out of the house. Feeling excluded, I also left and ended up discussing divorce with my husband at a nearby diner.
I understand you didn't cheat. It was all a misunderstanding. Miriam is definitely our child, so I take back the divorce. We should just go back and live together again.
Indeed, typical of my opportunistic husband. It was surprising that he came up with such a convenient proposal at this point. With a sense of disillusionment, I responded in a measured tone. Of course not. The misunderstanding is cleared, but words once said can't be unsaid. The things you said were too harsh, not only towards me, but calling Miriam a child of a worthless woman is unforgivable. I can't stay married to someone who can say such things easily. I'll proceed with the divorce.
Wait, don't say that.
He tried to stop me, but I gave him a cold smile. Isn't it for the best? You'll be rid of a wife who won't live with your parents or quit her job and doesn't listen to your family. You used to support me, but gradually you just followed your mother's words. I refuse to stay with an unsupportive husband. Let's handle the rest through a lawyer. Goodbye. I quickly stood up, leaving my bewildered husband alone in the bustling diner filled with happy families. Then, I boarded the train to pick up my daughter waiting at my parents' home. He returned to his family home only to be denied entry, as his father had said, and was fired from the family business. Naturally, I received a message stating that the discussion about him being the heir was now void. I ignored the message and immediately started looking for a law firm to proceed with the claim for compensation. Because my husband's actions were considered emotional harassment, I was able to claim $20,000 in compensation. After receiving the certified mail, my husband complained that he had no job and couldn't pay, but I firmly refused to reduce the amount. He had been complacent about eventually taking over the family business and becoming the president without saving any money. I knew well that he had squandered all his earnings, apart from living expenses, on alcohol and gambling. Moreover, we could no longer afford the apartment we lived in. Meanwhile, my ex-Mill, caught for her affair and facing a late-life divorce, managed to contact her past lover and sought refuge with him. My ex-husband got in touch with his mother, and they met up to go together to the home of the man who was his biological father, resulting from the affair. The man, who was the affair partner 30 years ago, was shocked and greatly bewildered when the woman from back then and the unexpected son suddenly showed up at his doorstep. He claimed not to remember such things from so long ago. He denied remembering the past incident, trying to evade the situation. My ex-Mill, catching him, insisted on a DNA test, claiming she would bear the cost. This scene unfolded at his doorstep, discovered by his current wife, leading to a confrontation among the three. The affair from 30 years ago was now exposed, and the biological father's wife, upon learning of his past infidelity, initiated a divorce, causing a commotion in front of my ex-Mill and my ex-husband. Following the argument between my ex-husband and me, there was a fight between my ex-husband's parents, and finally a confrontation between the affair partner of my ex-husband's mother and his wife. One chaotic scene led to another, resulting in a tumultuous situation everywhere. While this was happening, I rented a new apartment close to my parents' home and started living there with my daughter. I never wanted to return to the room I shared with my husband, nor could I rely on my parents' house indefinitely. My mother later encouraged me, saying, "Your husband is strange, and so is his family. It's good that you divorced. From now on, let's take good care of Miriam together." I felt relieved with her occasional assistance. After apologizing and explaining the situation to my company, I requested a transfer to a branch closer to my new home, which was granted due to my good work record. My work performance had been well regarded, so although it was regrettable to leave the main office, my transfer request was accepted, and I was able to return to work successfully. Just as I was starting my new life, my mother arrived at my house with an angry expression.
Can you hear me out?
It seemed she wasn't angry with me, so I let her in to listen.
Your ex-husband showed up at our house of all places. Can you believe it?
As my mother sipped the tea I made, her brows furrowed in irritation. I felt a sense of disgust at his shamelessness and sorry for the trouble caused to my parents' home.
He said he's unemployed and can't pay child support, so he came begging to you for help. When I told him you've already started a new life, he turned pale and trembled, shamelessly asking us for money too. He was so disgraceful that I quickly threw him out.
After venting, my mother seemed relieved and drank her tea quickly. "I'm sorry for causing trouble even to you, Mom." When I apologized, she gave me a generous smile.
It's okay. It's all over now. I warned him that I'd call the police if he came again, so he won't bother us anymore. You should forget about it quickly and focus on doing your best for yourself and Miriam.
My mother said this and gently tapped my shoulder. Encouraged by her warmth, tears welled up in my eyes. By the way, my mother is genuinely typo. Afterward, I received messages and voicemails from my ex-husband almost daily. It seems that my ex-husband, his mother, and her affair partner, all ousted from their respective homes, ended up living together out of necessity. When I saw the messages, I couldn't help but laugh at the bizarre combination. However, it was clear that those who had caused such turmoil couldn't possibly live together harmoniously. Indeed, it seemed none of them were getting along. He turned to me for help, brazenly seeking assistance in his audacity. I ignored everything and blocked his accounts and phone numbers. Yet, my ex-husband's refusal to accept reality persisted. Then, he even went so far as to show up at my current workplace. Fortunately, he never got the chance to confront me. Haunted by the repeated harassment, I had discussed his behavior with my company, which had taken preemptive measures. The moment the entrance surveillance cameras captured his presence, an alarm sounded throughout the office. I watched his actions through the office monitors. He was startled by the alarm and ran away from the approaching security guards. Witnessing my ex-husband's obsession, my coworkers unanimously sympathized with me and promised to prevent him from coming near in the future. Following that incident, another person visited my company. Surprisingly, it was my ex-Mill, with whom I should have had no connection. Unfortunately, she arrived during my lunch break when I was out of the office and confronted me in the hallway.
Finally found you. You need to take responsibility for once.
Her voice echoed in the office corridor. A passerby employee looked on with concern as someone from outside the company angrily confronted me, distorting her face in rage. "What do you mean, suddenly? Why have you come to my workplace?" As I stood bewildered, she, now considerably more haggard and pale than before, began to shriek at me in a shrill voice.
Of course, it's your responsibility. If only you hadn't looked into things like blood types. If you hadn't done that DNA test, none of this would have happened. Your unnecessary actions have ruined everything I've built up. Now it's all a complete mess.
Despite her own infidelity and decades of silence, she tried to shift the blame onto me. As she lunged at me, security detained her. The situation quickly escalated to the point where the police were called. Strangely, my ex-husband was also present, seemingly watching from the shadows, and it appears they were both taken in for questioning together. I desperately wanted them to stop. I had already begun a new life and was completely severed from my ex-husband through divorce. "I'm begging you, just let me live a peaceful life," I thought to myself as I headed home the next day. Just like the previous day, there was someone lurking in the hallway at the office. This time, it was my ex-Phil who showed up. I never told him where I work, so I wondered where he got the information. Feeling uneasy, I met his gaze and he said, "Well, I've made some noise and caused a lot of trouble in the past. After divorcing my wife and kicking out my son, I realized we're short-staffed at the company. Just because we're divorced, you're still part of the family, right? So, how about helping out at our place as an employee?" he said with a sly grin, spouting some nonsensical theory. "Please don't be ridiculous. I am your estranged son's ex-wife. We have no connection now. If you're headhunting, please look elsewhere." When I responded with at most calm, my ex-Phil's smirk quickly turned into a sharp glare, and he aggressively closed in on me.
What? You're talking back now. When you were married to my son, you refused to quit your job or live with us, always having your own way. And now, even when I'm offering to hire you from scratch, after cutting ties with my son and wife, you still refuse. Geez, modern women are also presumptuous and annoying.
His unreasonable behavior was obviously out of place, and just like when my ex-mill showed up, security and the police arrived soon after and took him away. Thus, the days of the three related individuals intruding on my workplace came to an end, and I was finally able to be free, with my colleagues expressing their concern for me. I can now focus on my work peacefully. Regarding my ex-husband's family, it seems my ex-Phil tried to use the still family even after divorce theory on my ex-husband and ex-Mel to salvage the understaffed business. Both my ex-husband and ex-Mel, struggling with housing and finances, reluctantly agreed to help if it meant having a place to live and work. But a family so riddled with lies and betrayal couldn't possibly function well together. As expected, both their family life and business did not go well, with loud arguments echoing throughout the neighborhood day and night, leading to their ostracism by the community. Despite this, I am receiving the alimony payments consistently. Because I have a lawyer involved, they send reminders whenever the payments stop. Likely, making the alimony payments is straining their finances to the point where they are living begrudgingly in debt. To repay the debt, their financial situation worsens and they are engulfed in a vicious cycle. My ex-husband seems to be exploited for cheap labor at his father's company. On the other hand, my life is looking up. With the expertise I developed at the headquarters, I am valued at my new workplace. I am praised for my fast and accurate work and have already gained the trust of my colleagues. Talks of promotions and greater responsibilities have already begun, and I am expected to excel even more than before. The environment is peaceful and cheerful, making me want to work here for a long time. My parenting is also going well. With Miriam in daycare during the day and occasional help from my mother, she is growing up fast. Regular visits to the doctor have gradually improved her eczema, providing some peace of mind. Her eager sharing of daily events at daycare is irresistibly adorable. Her third birthday is quickly approaching, and my mother and I are discussing how to celebrate it. Even though she is still young and may not remember, I want to give her a lovely and adorable celebration. Recently, my mother has been diligently knitting a handmade sweater for her.
I'll knit the cutest sweater in the world, so look forward to it.
My mother said, beaming with enthusiasm in front of me. I've started baking, making daily treats while preparing to make my daughter's birthday cake with my own hands. Strawberry cake is nice, but apple pie sounds good too. What do you think, Miriam? When I asked Miriam, she adorably responded, apple pie. Her cuteness made me smile involuntarily. There might be hardships in the long journey of life ahead, but I want to face them with a smile, trusting the people around me, carefully handling both my job and parenting. With Miriam by my side, everything feels manageable.